Terminals, books, tablets, newspapers, artifacts, plates and notes are some elements in games that allow you to expand your lore or progress the story. Typically you interact with them and they show some sort of UI element giving key information. Sometimes the UI is interactive, sometimes it's completely static and can only be exited. Whatever your theme or story, an object to display relevant information to the player is a great way to create good exploration in gameplay. Hi, I'm Dan, and in this tutorial we will be looking at the Fallout terminal and trying to replicate its functionality in Unreal Engine 4. Let's get started. To get started, either load up your existing solution or create one from one of the existing templates. Every template should work except the blank and the AR ones. I think every other one should work. In my example, I'm using a game that I'm currently working on, so I'll be using this. Let's get started by creating a blueprint that's going to house all of our objects. So I'm going to go into my content browser, and in classes I'm just going to create a new folder and call it terminal. Because everything I'm going to be referencing in mine is going to be a terminal, but for you it can be anything else, a book or a statue of a Spartan if you really want. When you're in your folder, right click and create a new blueprint class and just give it an actor and call it BP, and I'm going to call mine terminal, but feel free to call yours anything you want. This is going to be our generic object blueprint, so we don't have to recreate loads for each different type of thing. Once in here, go to add component and just add an arrow. I do this because it gives you a nice sense of direction when you're looking at it, so you know which way is forward. And then going back to the default scene route, I'm just going to simply add a box collision. There we go. And I'm going to call this activation point. And this is going to be where your character looks at and interacts with in order to activate the object. So I'm just going to roughly place it, but we can move it later. Save, compile, and let's jump back into the editor. Drag it out and put it roughly where you want it to be. And now I'm going to add the model into it that you want to use. So to do this, in your details pane here, just simply click at default scene route, add component, and I'm going to search for a static mesh. There we go. And I'm going to call this just static mesh for now. Next, we need to figure out which model we're going to have in here. So this is the machine I'm going to use. So I'm going to click it, click my static mesh, and just click the link arrow to set it. And you can see it's there, but it's in the wrong place. So I'm just going to rotate it 90 degrees and make sure it's in the middle. Yeah, it is. That looks good. And now I'm going to click the activation point and move it so it's roughly in the right place where the player is going to be looking at it. The next thing you need to do is you need to make sure that your static mesh object has a collider on it. Otherwise, it's not going to register our clicks later. So on the static mesh, just scroll down to the collision and make sure block all is just turned on. Just standard block all will be fine. Next, we need a way to tell when we are close to this. So bring back your terminal by clicking Edit Blueprint Terminal, and if you've got multi-windows, just drag it across. Jump into the event graph, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a variable over here, and we're just going to call it is in range. Why not? And we don't need it to be public, so we can ignore that, and we'll just leave everything as normal. We'll delete these things here because we don't need them. Click your activation point, and we're going to set an event on it called onComponentBeginOverlap. This will basically be when something walks up and hits this activation point. At the moment, it's anything. NPCs, flies, anything. So we need to limit it out so only the player can activate it. So from Other Actor, just drag out and type cast, and you need to know what the name of your player is. For me, it's player. I know that already, and you can see it's linked up. But to find it out, if you just find your player in your window here, you'll see that mine's called tutorial porn, but it's a type of player. So if you just find whatever your player is, find it and then get the name of it. If you haven't got a name of it, you might want to consider creating it as a blueprint. It will save you a lot of time down the line. Once we've done this, we need to set this is in range. So just click it and hold the Alt key to drag out and create a set. If you can't do that because you don't have an Alt key, just drag it out and it will offer you get all set, just like that. And then what we're going to do is link this to this, and we're going to tick is in range because we want it to set it when we are overlapping it as we are in range. And then we need to create another variable called the player. This is more so we can pass around which player is using it. So just find the name of it, and then we have a player. Again, this doesn't need to be public, so we should be okay with that. Drag it out, holding Alt to set it, and we're just going to set it to the player that we've cast, and then just link it up, just like so. If you want to get the lines straight but you can't do it, just double click them and you should be able to create a little branch so you can drag it out, like so. Perfect. Next, what we need to do, now that we've hit the object, cast it to our player, made sure it is our player, set that we are in range, and then set our variable that this is the player who's done it, we basically need something to say, now we can trigger the terminal. So I'm just going to go down here, I'm going to right click, add custom event, like so, and I'm going to call this toggle terminal. You can even just keep it called toggle if you want. And for now, I'll just get this and drag out a print string so we can test it working. And then from here, I'm just going to call this toggle terminal down there. Now that we've done that, we need a way to exit it as well. So activation point at the events again, just going to do an end overlap. And then we are going to literally do everything we've done again here below. We're going to check that the player's the one leaving it, which he is. We're going to untick is in range because they've left it. We're going to delete this reference to this player so it just empties the variable out, and we're going to connect it to toggle terminal. And it's that simple. So now with a quick test, you can see that I have my machine here. I walk up, you can see at the top, which is exactly what we typed. So your activation point is already working. So I'm going to be using the key E, and when we walk up, I press E. We need to know that the object in front of us is a type of object we can interact with. Now we could do this with a bunch of branch nodes and have if this, if this, if this, if this, but that's a horrible way of doing it. So instead we're going to use interfaces, and all we do is say, does the object that we're looking at have this interface, yes or no? If it does, interact with it. So back in your classes folder, just create a new folder, and I'm going to call this interfaces. And inside here, we're going to right click, we're going to go blueprints, and we're going to create a blueprint interface. So I'm going to call this one BPI for blueprint interface and interact. This one could be reused for not just the terminal, but this is where I'm going to put it for now. So open this up, and in here, all you simply need to do is click your function and rename it. So I'm going to call mine interact. Save, compile, and that's all we need to do on that part. And all we need to do now is make our blueprint terminal have that interface. So simply go to your blueprint terminal or your blueprint object, class settings, and under interfaces, implemented interfaces, click add BP interact. Just that. Then you should be able to right click and do event interact. And right there, add event interact from BPI interact. If you get yours looking more like a node like this, where it's got an in and out, try again, you need the red one. We now need to actually tell the player to call the interface when we press the correct key. So first thing is you need to figure out what key you want, and then go edit, project settings, and then down the side you will see input. And in here is your action mappings. This is what keys you will press in the game. I already have one set up called Interact, but I'll just do a quick demo one. So click add at the top, give it a name, so I'm going to call this demo just for now. And in here you can pick any peripheral that Unreal supports. So I'm going to click the keyboard and I'm just going to press E. So we have a key for E. You can add another one into it, and then we can pick gamepad and we'll pick button top. So you press the Y button or the triangle. And that's how you do it. It's that simple. But I've already got one where I've done that exact same thing. Look. So cross that off and now find your player and click edit player. We need to just add something to your player. So as you can see, I've already got a bunch of stuff here for the player, but you don't need to worry too much about that. So down here, we're just going to right click and we're going to create a new event, and it's going to be event interact. It'll be the name of what you called your key. So in this example, it would have been called demo, but in input action interact. And we're going to drag off here and we're going to do a line trace for objects, just like that. First, we're going to drag our first person camera in, or where you want the Linecast to fire from, because the line trace is a line from A to Z, and it'll get you all the objects it collides with in between. So from my perspective on a first person, it will be the camera looking forwards. If you've got a third person, you could do it from your controller or your model. For me, I'm going to drag the first person camera, holding control to do a get, or drag out and click get. From here, I'm going to do a get world transform, like so, to get me the scale, rotation and location. From the return value, I'm going to right click and I'm going to split struct pin like that. The location, I'm just going to drag into the start, because that's where we want it to start from, the start of the camera. Nice and easy. From the rotation, we're going to drag out to a get forward vector, and this is going to get the vector directly in front of our camera. From the return value, we're going to drag off and we do a multiply, and it'll be a vector times float, and just give this how far you want your line trace to go. So I'm going to say do it 1,000 in front of the player. And from the bottom one, we're just going to drag up and we're going to create a vector add, like so, and it'll be vector plus vector, and then just disconnect this, holding Alt and clicking, drag it to the bottom one instead, just to make it look a bit neater. And from the location, we're going to drag into the top one. So we're going to get from the location, and we're going to add it to 1,000 points in front. So basically, directly ahead of the camera by 1,000 units. And from this, drag it into the end. Next, from the object types, just drag it down and type make array, like so. And this will give you an array of which object types you want to scan for. Now, if you wanted to go really advanced and efficient, you'd go and create your own type. But for me, I'm just going to set it to world static, just like that. Perfect. So now that we've got our line trace set up, we're going to go from the out hit, and we're just going to type break hit result. And this will give us a list of everything that it collects when that line hits an object. And from the hit actor, we're going to drag out and we're going to type does implement interface. There we go. So in the interface, we're going to check for hours. So BPI interact. So does it have this interface? If it does have that interface, we basically need to come off from it and go branch. So basically say if it has this interface. And from this true node, we're just going to come across and we're going to type interact, which is the name of our interface. And you can see BPI interact, send a message like so. And the last thing we need to do is just drag the hit actor into the target so we know what's doing it. Match up your line trace to your branch. And that's it. Now, when we go up and look at our object and press the interact key, it should fire a line trace, check if it implements the interface. If it does, call the interact method, which save compile when you go back to your Blueprint terminal is this one. And this one we will come off print screen, and we will call this one simply interact. Save, compile, and run your game. And as you can see, when we walk up, we're now in range, press the E key, interact. Now that we have our basic interaction system, we need the UI. So back in your terminal folder, just right click new folder and we'll create a UI folder. Within here, we're going to right click user interface and we're going to create a widget blueprint. And I'm going to call this UMG underscore terminal, and we'll open this up. Perfect. So this window is where we create our UI, and it's really simple to do. So in our canvas panel here, we're just going to rename this to be CP main, and this will house the two we're going to do, because the first one we're going to have is a nice little text in the middle saying press this to interact. So we're going to go to CP main, we're going to create another canvas panel. So from the palette, drag canvas panel into here, and I'm going to call this CP underscore action text. And I'm going to come up to anchors, hold Control and Shift and press the bottom stretch one across there. Then we can just drag it up a little bit just to roughly where we want the text to be. Inside CP action text, I'm going to drag in a text block, here we go, into there. And I'm going to call this on screen key, like so. So with this one, I'm going to set the anchors to be center, so it's just dead center in the middle, and I'm going to tick size to content. And then in the text block, let's call it press E to action, like so. So some dead basic text. And if you've got any fonts and the colors, anything you want, now this is the time to set it. I do indeed have a font on mine. So in font, I'm going to click font and I'm going to click my NASA font. You can add anything else you want to it, like outlines and anything. Back in CP main, let's add another canvas panel, like so. And this will be CP underscore terminal. And this is going to be the actual terminal. So I'm going to make this one full screen. And the first thing I'm going to do is drag in a nice little background blur. Drag it into the CP terminal. And we'll just keep it called background blur. Stretch it to be full screen using Control and Shift again. And now, as we increase the blur strength, you should see that everything becomes really nice and blurry. So I'm going to set it to 11. Now that we have that done, we need a little bit in the middle to actually have our terminal for what I'm going for. So I'm going to drag in another canvas panel inside the CP terminal, and I'm just going to call this one terminal body, like so. And within this, make sure it's centered, and then you can just roughly size this to what you need for your terminal. Now that we have our terminal body, let's drag in some images, and this image will be our actual body, and I'm going to set this to be full size inside there. And then in the brush, I'm going to select the image, and we just need to find what image you want for the body. There we are. So now I'm going to add a title to the top, because everybody's probably going to want a title. So in terminal body, just drag in a vertical box. There we go. And this will be our title, VB title box. And all I'm going to do is center align this one to the top, and then we can just zoom in, drag it down a bit, and then just stretch it out. And the reason we're using a vertical box is it means we can nicely center our text no matter how much is in it, like so. And within this title box, let's just drag in another text. There we go. And we'll just call this txt title. And I'm just going to simply set it to be auto-lined on the height and click fill just to center align it. And we'll just give it a demo text of title. We'll be setting this later in code. Next, we need some place for our content to be in the middle, but because we might have a large amount of content, we want it to be scrollable. So if you just search in the palette for scroll, you'll find the scroll box. Drag it into your terminal body, just like so. And in here, we can call this SB content, and this is where all of our content will be. Center align it directly in the middle, and we'll just stretch it out so it hits most sides, like so. But I'm going to leave a gap at the bottom so I can have my back button. And that's what we're going to have now. So in the scroll, search for button, drag the button in to the terminal body, call it BTN back, and I will drop it to the bottom of the place, drag it into there, and inside here I'm going to add a text. I'm going to call it txt back, and in here I'll just type back, set my font, perfect. And now all we need to do on the button is actually set its image. So in style, normal, and set your image. So I've set the image, I just set it to draw as image to make it nicer, scaled it up a little bit, and we've got a back button. All you need to do now is do the same thing for hovered, otherwise it's going to look odd. And the same thing for pressed. And there's our basic UI almost complete. The only other things we need to do is reference in as variables the little bits that we're going to want to use in code. So the button we need to be set as variable so we can access it. The scroll box, so SB content, tick is variable. The title, so we can set it. The canvas panel terminal, so we can enable and disable it. And the action text as well. And that's it. Now that we have our basic terminal UI done, and this could be a book or any other UI you find, we next need to actually do the content within the scroll box, and this is going to be two, an option and a text. The text will just be big blobs of text, so like when you're reading some documents or something, and the option will be what you click on, similar to the back button. So back in Unreal, if you go back into your classes folder, in the UI I'm going to right click, user interface, widget blueprint, and I'm going to call it UMG option, and we'll open this one up. Within this one, we don't need the canvas panel anymore, so you can delete that. I'm going to drag a button straight into the root, and in this I'm going to call it BTN option, and for me I'm going to go and set the opacity of every one of the colours to be 0, so it just looks empty. And then within the button I'm going to create a text, drag it in, and just call this txt option. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to left align it, and I'm going to set some basic settings like my font. You can even set the font size if you want. And now we're going to go up to the top and we're going to click into graph, and we need to going to handle roughly what this button does when you click on it. So as you can see, it's already made it a variable. If not, go back, click on it, and tick the is variable at the top. And on the button option, I'm just going to click the on clicked event here. Perfect. So what we need to do is when we click this button is tell the UI we've clicked this button, so the UI knows what to do, because this is going to be our brain of the UI. Everything on here does, the back button, the options inside, will be controlled from here. So we need a way to pass that information back up. So what we can do is create something called an event dispatcher, which is the equivalent of a delegate if you've done coding before, or it's a way for something smaller to tell something else, I'm doing this at this current moment. And our bigger things, such as our terminal, can connect to this event dispatcher and say, tell me when you've done this. So I'm going to add a new event dispatcher, and I'm going to call this terminal option clicked. And then in the inputs here, I'm going to add one input, and I'm going to call it option name. So each option is going to have two values, a text and a name. The name is going to be the ID that we don't change, so unique ID which differentiates every single option, and the text will simply be what we just show on the screen. So I'm going to set the data type to be name, like so. Perfect. From the unclicked, I'm just going to call terminal option clicked. Call terminal option clicked. Boom, just like that. And now this wants an option name, so in the variables at the top, I'm going to create a new variable called option name, and I'm going to set this to public, and I'm going to set it to a type of name. And while I'm here, I'm also going to create an option text and set it to public as well, and I'm going to set this to be type of text. like so. Perfect. So I'm going to drag out the option name holding Control, and I'm just going to link it to here like so. But now we need a way to actually populate the option name and text from the terminal, and we could do it manually in the terminal, but let's house it together while we're there. So inside here, I'm going to right click, add custom event like so, and I'm going to call this set details like so. But I need to tell this to basically say give me the data. So in the inputs, while clicked on your event, add parameter, open it up if you close it, and I'm going to call this name, and I'm going to set it to a type of name. I'm also going to add another one, and I'm going to call it text. I'm going to set this to type of text like so. Then we've got two values from it now. So what we can do is we can drag off from this, and we can go set option name, and we're going to drag the option name into it. And then we can also drag off from this and do set option text, and we're going to set the option text while we're here. Now we can just highlight this, press C to add a comment, and do set details. So it's nows and housed together. Do the same here. Click event. Now within the same set details, we need to set the text of the actual option. So go back to the option, click text, make sure you've ticked is variable. Back to the graph, expand this comment box out, and drag the txt option out as a get. Drag off and do set text like so. Then we can connect this to there like so, and we can grab the text and plug it into there. So that'll set the actual text now when we call set details. Now that we have our option, the second one we need to do is the text. So right click back in the content browser, user interface, widget, UMG, text. Open this up, and all we're going to do is drag a text straight into the canvas panel, and we're going to call it txt content, and size it in the anchors to be full size. Do all your little fonty changes, and just set it to be is variable. And this one is done. That simple. Now that we have our three UI portions, we basically need to show this first UI when we walk up to the object, and then when we press it, we then toggle it and show the next one. So on CP terminal, just while we're here, scroll down and set the is visible and set it to collapsed. That just means it won't show in the game, so it's going to appear like that when we go up to it. So in your BP terminal, on your toggle terminal here is when we walk up to it, we can now delete these in range string, and we can start creating the actual UI on the screen. So drag off and create a flip-flop. A flip-flop is basically do this one, next time do this one. It's a nice little way instead of having to store it yourself. From the A node, we're going to create a widget, and we're going to set the class to be our UMG terminal, so our main terminal. And every UI you create, you need to give it an owning player. If you've got multiplayer, then you need to reference whichever player has picked it up, but you could probably do this from the cast player if you want to do it that way. For me, I'm just going to drag off get owning player, I'm going to type get player controller, just like that. And I'm going to put it in the middle because we're going to be using it again in a minute on the B side of the flip-flop. So now that we have our UI, we need a way to store what we've actually created. So in the variables, I'm just going to create a new terminal UI, and I'm going to set this to be our terminal widget. So UMD terminal, and I'm going to set the return value to be the terminal UI, like so. So we've now set the variable so we can access it and destroy it again later. And then the final thing we need to do is we need to add to viewport. So this A branch will now go off and create that on the screen for you. Perfect. So now from the B side, we need to deactivate it. So from the return value, I'm just going to firstly show the mouse cursor, and I'm just going to untick it so we hide the mouse cursor. You might not need to do this, but for my case I do. From the B side, I'm going to plug into it. Following this on, I'm going to drag the UI terminal out, and I'm going to drag up from it, and I'm going to do remove from parent, like so. This will delete the UI, connect it up to there, and then I'm going to set the terminal UI after we've just used it, and I'm just going to set it to nothing, so it deletes the reference to it in memory. I'm going to highlight all of this, comment it up, toggle terminal, and while I'm here, I'm going to do this one. So if you test it, when you walk up to it, press E to action, and then when you walk away, perfect, we've got a start. Now that we have our UI and our terminal almost done, we need one storage medium to store all of our generic data, but we need to do it in a way where it's so generic that we can use it across any different options we want to use. So in the content manager, create a new data structure folder, and the first one we're going to do is we're going to create a blueprints structure. I'm going to call this UDS for user defined structure, and we'll call it terminal options. And this is going to be the layout for how our options work. So when we have like a main menu. So the first variable I'm going to call title, and I'm going to set it to be type of text. Then I'm going to add another variable, and I'm going to call it text and set it to type text. And that's all we're going to do for now on this section. Next, now that we have a list of our options, we need a variable per screen so we know what's happening at each stage. So we'll have the main menu as a screen, the residence as a screen, the log as a screen. Not the data within them, just the actual this is a screen. This will help navigation. So back in your content manager, in your data structure folder, right click blueprints, click primary data asset, select, and I'm going to call this PDA underscore terminal details underscore screen. So this is like a fancy blueprint without the view part. And in here, we're simply going to create two variables. One called previous screen, and I'm going to set this to a data type of itself, PDA terminal details screen. So this will be which screen comes before this in the chain of order. And I'm going to set this to be public by clicking the eyeball. Next, we need our options. I'm going to set this to options, and I'm going to set this to a data table. And the data table is how we're going to have a list of all our different options. Eyeball, save, compile, and that's the screen part done. The final part of our data structure is going to be another primary data asset, so primary data asset, and I'm going to call this PDA terminal details. And we have done this backwards, and it will make sense. This terminal details will be directly attached to this object. It will be this terminal has this screen with these options, and then this option has these screens with these other options, and we just link them all together. So you'll only ever have one terminal details per object, but you'll have loads of different screens and options. So inside here, we're going to create a variable, and we'll call this title, and we'll set it to type text. Eyeball, and we'll click variable again, we'll set a text, and this will be if the title will be the title at the top of the UI. The text will be if you want a terminal where you go up and it just says deactivated with no options or anything. You can do it here. Type text again, and the final one will be a screen, and this will be eyeball again, our screen, so PDA terminal details screen, and this will be the first screen it links to. And now the only other thing we have to do is back in the options, create another variable called next screen. And in here, just set it to your screen. Boom. So now we go to the terminal details options, we render the title, we render the text if any, if not, we render the screen, so we go into the screen. We have our list of options that will render on the page. The list of options will tell us a title, and the text, if you click on the option, will just render the text. Otherwise, it'll take you into another screen, which will come back to here. And then when we click the back button, we can use the previous screen to go back to the previous options screen. Now that we have our data structure out, let's add some data. So right click, new folder as data. I'm just doing that at root again. And I like to have another folder inside of this one to separate each one. So on this, I'll just call it ATM terminal. And inside this one, we're going to start with our screen, our main details. We're going to go right click miscellaneous data asset and scroll down and find your primary data asset, the first one. So PDA terminal, and I'm going to call this ATM terminal, just like that. And when we open it up, it'll look very different, but the variables will be the same. Well, what should we call this? Cash 3000 monkey. I don't know why, it sounds epic though. And in the text, we're going to leave blank because I don't want to render any text, I actually want to have options. And in the screen, we haven't got a screen yet, so we'll leave that blank for now. So let's create our first screen. So I'll go in, I'll go to miscellaneous again, data asset, and I'll find down and find the terminal details screen. I'm going to call it main menu. And after the Unreal crashes and it comes back, I'm going to create ATM terminal main menu, and I'm going to open it up. And now we have a previous screen, which we don't have one because this is our first screen, so we can ignore that. That's how we'll know in code to exit instead. And the options, well, we don't have any options at the moment, so save, and we'll just keep that as is for now. So let's create the options for the main menu. So right click, miscellaneous data table, and we're going to call this, actually first, we need to pick our UDS terminal options. This is how the data table is going to work. Click OK and call it ATM terminal main menu options. There we go. I like to go for the bigger naming scheme, so when we are selecting screens later, we know exactly what's what. So as you can see, we have title, text and next screen and nothing much else. So click add to add a row. There's our first row. So we'll give our row name, just call it something random. So I'll call it residence. This needs to be unique. We don't use it, but it's for a primary key. In the title, I'll call it residence. Text, I will leave blank because we'll go to another screen with this one, and that's all I'm going to do on that one. So I'll click add again. We'll call this one spending, and in the title, I'll call it spending. And in the text, I'll call it, wow, you spent $500 on sweets, like how, wow, this was so much sugar. There we go. Two nice little options there. And now we can open back the ATM main menu. And in the options, we can set the options just like that. Perfect. And now we need to create the next screen. So back down here again, right click, miscellaneous, data asset, select your screen, select ATM terminal residence. And this will have more options again, but the previous screen will be your main menu. So click it in the content inspector, click the arrow to link it up. So now when we click back, it will go to the main menu. And then create another options. So miscellaneous data table, select your UDS terminal options. Okay. ATM terminal resident options. There we go. Click add and I'll go. There we go. So Dan spent 250 on a lot of space creds. Kate, John and Katie also data there. Back to our ATM residence, we can now select our data table for residents, and that's it. So the ATM terminal links to the main menu links to main menu options, the main menu options links to a resident, the resident links to the main menu if it needs to go back, otherwise it links to the resident options. And that's our data done. Now we all have to do is code it up. So the next portion of this video is going to be highly code oriented. So open up your UMG terminal as we're going to start coding the brain of this. So the first thing we're going to do is create two events to basically toggle between the E2 action and the actual terminal. So it should be relatively simple. So jump into your graph on your UMG terminal and delete everything what's currently there. Right click and add custom event, and we're just going to call this one show terminal. And in here, we're going to drag on the CP terminal, which is our actual body, the GUI part of it. And we're going to drag this off and go set visibility. This will basically allow us to change whether it's visible or not. And since this is show terminal, we're going to change it to visible. And then we're going to grab the other panel, which is going to handle the action text, and we're going to set visibility on this as well. And we're going to set this one to be collapsed. And we use collapsed and not hidden because hidden still takes up a space on the screen, whereas collapsed just removes it outright. Personally, I think they should be reversed, but yeah, so drag that in. And that's our first method or event for showing the terminal. So once this is called, it'll show our terminal and hide the action text. Copy it and paste it below and just change this second one to hide terminal and then reverse the options. So this will be collapsed and this will be visible. That's it, comment it up and then we're done. Control terminal visibility. The next event we're going to create will be a one to add our option text. Not the actual option because that's going to take more, but the actual text that we'll see on the screen. So as per everything, start with adding a custom event and we'll call it add text. Nice and simple. From here, we're going to go and create off a widget. So add widget. And then what we need to do is set the class to be our text, just like that. But now we need to actually tell it what text to set it to. And because we're going to be calling this event when we're creating the text, we can click on it and in the inputs, click add. And in here we'll call it text, and we're just going to set it to a text. And we're going to drag the owning player, and we're just going to do player controller to assign it to the current player. From the return value, we're going to go off and get the TXT content so we can edit it. If you can't see it, make sure you've ticked is variable in that class. From here, drag off and do set text. There we go. Plug it in. And then drag the text from here all the way over here. And remember, you can double click on it to make it neater. There we are, looks neater. Next, in order to add it to our actual form, drag down the SB content, holding control to do a get. Drag from here and do add child because we want to add it inside the scroll box. Link it up via the exec method, and then the content will just end up being our created UMG class. Highlight it all, name it, that's our add text event. The next event will probably be the most complex one we've done yet, so just create an add custom event and call it clear main content. And this is going to clear the scroll box, so it's got nothing in it, so we can reuse it basically. So drag off from your scroll box holding control. When you drag from it, do clear children and then link it up. Now the hardest part of this is to comment it. Clear main content. And that's that one done. The next event we're going to create is adding the actual option buttons to the screen. So create a new event called add option buttons. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to call our clear main content. Then we need to create a boolean and we're just going to call it showing text. And all this is going to do is decide or not whether we're currently showing options or we're currently showing text, because it drives how we go back later. So instantly set that showing text and just make sure it's set to false, so unchecked. Then we need to actually store which details we want to start loading. So create a variable and call it current terminal screen and set its type to be PDA terminal details screen. And from this, drag it out as a get and then grab its options. So get options, just like so. And then from the options, do a get data table row names, and this is going to get us all of those names in the options that we just set to be unique. This is how we're going to differentiate and loop through them. From the out row names, drag a for each loop. Perfect. And then from the array element, which is each row we're currently going through, or each name, go and get its data table row, and this is going to get us the entire row so we can start getting the title and stuff. Set the data table to be the options itself, like so. Then we're instantly going to get the out row and we're going to break it, which basically gives us access to everything within it. So break terminal options. Then from the row found is if it can't find row if we're guessing for it or if we're assuming it's there, but we know it's there because we're looping through it, so we can ignore the not found. We're going to create a widget straight away and we're going to set it to be our option. So it's going to start now creating the option. The owning player will just be our player controller, like so. And then we're instantly going to set the details, which is the method we created earlier, which wants two inputs, a name and some text. So we're going to set the text to be the title, like so. And yeah, it should be text to text, but trust me, title's the one we want. And set the name to be the array element from the for each loop, because this is the names. Then we just add it to the scroll box. So drag in, add child, link it together, get the widget, add it to the constant. Yeah, if you organise your lines, it'll make a lot more sense. And that's it. That is how we create your options. So comment it up and then we'll move on to the next stage. So the next stage of the options is the click event. So what happens when we click it? So just drag off from the return value of the widget you've created and do a bind event to terminal option clicked, just like so. And just drag it off to the side somewhere because it's going to get funky, like so. And then from the event, just drag down and type a add custom event, like so. And it's annoying because it leads you back the other way. And just call it option clicked, like so. And now, from here, we can carry on going down and create the click event. So from this, drag down your current terminal screen, drag off and get its options, like so. Perfect. Then from your option clicked, get data table row, like so. Drag in the options to the data table, because then it links up perfectly, and drag the row name from the option name here. This is going to be which option was clicked. First thing we're going to do is clear the main content if the row is found. If the row is not found, then we will just add a helpful print string saying error row not found. You shouldn't hit that unless you've not mapped it up properly. So we'll just go from there. From the out row, just break it into your UDS terminal options so we can get each individual option within. And then here's where we jump between rendering text or rendering the next option buttons if we're going deeper down. From the clear main content, drag a branch. And then from the next screen, then from the text, drag out and create a is empty. And this is going to tell us whether or not we've got text in there. If we have got text, then we go and render the text. If we don't, then we render options. So from the true node, drag down and let's create a set showing text, and we'll take this as false still just to make sure it is definitely set as false, because otherwise we're going to run into some issues. drag down from here, and we're going to set the current terminal screen to our new next screen here. So now we've moved to the next screen. And then from here, add option buttons. So we're going to call our other event. Perfect. And from the false node, drag up, and yes, it's crisscross, but I couldn't figure a better way to do it. We're going to add text straight away, and then we're going to set the showing of text to true, just like that, because now we are rendering text. And the text, what we need to actually use is we're going to drag out from this text here and connect it straight to there. One way I like to organize the click event is I find the click event and move it on all by itself, and you can create comments within comments. So if I drag this event off this way and just wrap it in another click event called click event, you can see nicely it's within there, it's a subset of it. So the next event in our code is going to be the one that we initially call in order to actually set everything up. The control terminal visibility will show or hide it, but we actually need something to call the add text and the add option buttons from the start. So let's create a custom event, and I'm going to call mine setup. From here, we're instantly going to go into a branch node, and we need to determine in this branch node whether or not we're rendering text or options. So on the setup, add a new parameter and just call it details, and it's going to be type of your PDA terminal's details screen. From this, drag down and get the text parameter within it. So click on the setup, add a new parameter and call it details, and set this to be type of terminal details. This is going to be your initial screen. From within here, grab the text and check if it's empty and connect this up to your branch. If the text is empty, so true, we're going to set the current terminal screen, and this is where we're going to be first setting it. So drag up from the details, grab the screen, and then connect it in. From this, then go and set the text. So now that we're going to set the text, we're going to grab the title from the details again. So title, and we're going to plug it in to the text. There we go. So that's going to set the text of the title on our UI now. From here, we're going to call add option buttons, and that's where we're going to start rendering it. So we're going to render the title, and then we're going to render all the options. From the false node, this is what happens if we don't have any options. So we're going to come down and we're going to instantly add text, and we're going to set this to the details text, and that's that method done. So going to comment it and call it init UI. Now we're getting to the end of our coding stage, so we're going to create another event called quit, and this is going to be how we exit the terminal. So from here, we're going to instantly call hide terminal. Then we're going to run a node to get player pawn, so we're going to get the current player, and we're going to cast this to type of player just to make sure there's no issues there. And then I'm going to call my unlock player. So I have an event on my player called unlock player, which locks and unlocks them. This will be different for every single person's scenario. So my unlock event simply grabs my character movement and sets my walking mode to walking, and it unlocks my player and then just does a little bit other bits like removing my HUD and stuff. And the locked is the exact reverse. It stops my movement and then locks down the HUD so I can't see it anymore. So I'll leave that on screen if you want it now, but for every game, unless you're doing an FPS game, this will probably be different. So all we need to do now is get the player controller and then simply show the mouse cursor, and then untick it because we don't want to show it anymore because we're leaving, and I've just called it quit. The final event we're going to create is for our button back. So all we can do now is click the BTN back and click on clicked, and it will create the event for us. And then from here, we're going to drag off and instantly do a branch. And we're going to say now that variable that I told you about earlier, showing text. Are we currently rendering text, or are we currently rendering options? If we're currently rendering text, then we're going to simply come across and add option buttons, and that's it. That's all we're going to do for the true event. For the false event, we're going to come down and create another branch node, and we're going to get our current terminal screen, and we're going to get our options, and we're going to get our previous screen. And if this previous screen, and we're going to run it, is valid, which is going to tell us, do we have a previous screen? If we do, then all we're simply going to do is set the current terminal screen to be our previous screen, like so. And then we're going to call the add options button again, because we've got a previous screen. If we don't, we're going to call the quit method that we've just created, just like so. So the final portion of coding is we need to link up our actual player's interaction to the UI. So where we have the event interact, we're going to delete the print string, and we're going to create a new variable called screen details. And this is on your BP terminal. Make this public, and we're going to set this to be your terminal details, the initial one. We're going to drag this out as a get because we'll need this shortly, and we're going to drag this straight off to a branch. In this branch, we're going to call the is in range, so if we detect if the player is actually in range of it or not. If it's true, then we're going to disable the player, so we're going to grab the player, and I'm going to call my disable or lock method lock player. Next, we're going to get the player controller, and then from here we're going to show the mouse cursor, and we're going to drag it in and set it to true because we do want to show the mouse cursor now. Next, we're going to drag out our terminal UI, and we're going to call the show terminal to actually render it on the screen. And then from the same terminal UI, we're also going to call our setup method. And then the details it wants will simply be our screen details. And there is our final portion of coding. So if you simply compile and save and go back into Unreal, click off and click back on, and you'll see the screen details. Open it up and it wants the ATM terminal. We can run up to it, E to action works perfectly. Open it up and we have our terminal with our data. Click back, it'll quit straight away. Run back up to it, we can go to spending, and you'll see you spent 500 on sweets, like wow. And we can see we've got one problem, which is the wrapping, which I'll show you how to fix in a moment. Then we go to residents, you've got more options. You've got Katie, and you've got John, and then you've got Dan. Perfect, Dan spent a lot of tech. There we go. So all we need to do is make the text wrap, and then we're all sorted. So this is a simple fix. Simply go into your UI text, click text, search for wrap, and you'll see auto wrap tags. As you can see, it's that simple. But there's so much more you can add to this. For example, you could add sounds. So when you first join it and when you leave, when you press an option, you could have these highlight. For example, for some sounds, all you need is 4 basic sounds. I have a start, a select, quit, and a movement. So to simply plug these in, for your quit, open up your UI, and on your UI terminal in your graph, if you find your quit event, all you simply do at the end is play sound at location, click your quitting sound, and then press the bind button. And now when we click quit, it quits with a sound. If you open your UI option, click your button. If you search for sounds, Unreal has 2 built-in pressed and hovered sounds. So I will go into my movement sound, click it and click the hovered, and then go back out and click the select, compile, save and run it again. And now we have hovered sounds. Perfect. For your start sound, just go into the UMG terminal again, find your init UI, and after it adds the option buttons, simply add the sound, and then also drag from the add text into this as well. Click your sound, click the bind, and now when we click into it, we have start sound. And that's it. Just with extra little bits of blueprints, you can make it do anything you want. So there we go. With a little bit of extra effort, I hope you can appreciate how powerful this system is. So you can walk up to any random computer, E to activate, you see your details, you can log, you can see the text of it, you can scroll, you can view the residents. I've added animations, I've added nice fade effects when you first join. I've extended my ability so I can enable other objects and control them. I've also got other computers set up where I can go and view, and I've got a rip-off of the Fallout one because what we had to add that in. Why not? So yes, thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please leave a comment below for any more tutorials you'd like to see, and I'll see you next time.